Good evening, everyone. It is really good to be with you this evening. For those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Josh. I am one of the clergy here at St. Nick's. It's amazing to welcome you tonight and to be celebrating baptisms. Come on, how amazing was that? Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the invitation of God. Over the last few weeks as a community here at St. Nick's, we've been looking at God's invitation to make room at the table, to make room for growth, for the city, for God, for others. And I'm going to carry on tonight looking at God's invitation to you to make room to explore who He is. As we celebrate these baptisms tonight, what we're not celebrating is, something these guys have learned or about them like joining an organization. What we are celebrating is what God has done, God's heart for them, for you, for Bristol, and these individual moments where people have heard and responded to God's invitation to them and for them to explore who He is and to have found Him there. How incredible were those stories that those three shared? God meeting them in such different ways, but meeting them in their journeys, drawing them on. Maybe you're sat here tonight like, oh my word, I want like a bit of that. There's like something about that I am like feeling drawn to. That is what we are going to be looking at this evening. The invitation of God to explore who He is. And to do this, we're going to look together at a passage from the New Testament, from Luke's Gospel. This is Luke 10, 25 to 37. So it will be up on the screens and you can follow along. Here we go. Luke 10, 25. On one occasion, an expert of the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You've answered correctly," Jesus says. "Do this, and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." I don't know how you feel when you get asked a lot of questions. Before I had children, I would say I responded pretty well to people's questions. But last weekend, we had the joy of, I say the joy like it happened by fluke. I felt lucky. It was because my wife plans very far in advance. But we had tickets to the Women's Rugby World Cup final at Twickenham. Boom, we won. Sucks to be Canadian. Yes, the Red Roses. Come on. But as a family, it meant that we had to do about a 3-hour drive to Twickenham early on a Saturday morning, which turned from 3 hours to 4 hours and 20 minutes. And that last hour and 20 minutes was probably moving about half a mile. It was we could see the stadium, basically, for the last hour and 20 minutes. And the 3-year-old who was sat in the car said, "When are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? Why aren't we moving? What's that person over there doing? Why is the traffic not moving? When are we going to get there? Can I have a sweet? Can I have a snack? What am I going to eat when I'm at Twickenham? Who do you think's going to win the rugby today, Daddy? When are we going to get there? Why is the traffic not moving? And by the end, I was like, like that thing where a kettle finally boils. It was a bit like that. And I was like, my wife was saying, stop holding the steering wheel so hard. All the whites of my knuckles showing as I clenched the steering wheel. I don't know how you respond when you're asked lots of questions, but this interaction that we have just read is all about a guy who is asking Jesus lots of questions. You might know this story or have heard it before. Jesus is being questioned by a religious expert, some really clever dude in a really sweet robe, and he's asking Jesus all these questions about life, about how he should live, and how he can make sure that his life means that things will go well for him when he dies. And Jesus responds with a story about a man who is traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, and on the way he is attacked, beaten, and left half dead. A priest passes by. Everyone would expect him to stop. He doesn't. A Levite, which is another super religious-y type, he passes by. Everyone would expect him to stop. He doesn't. But then a Samaritan comes along. The crowd who were hearing this story would have been panicked. The Jews and the Samaritans hated each other as much as any two people groups could ever hate each other. They'd be expecting the Samaritan to give the guy a good kicking while he was down, maybe finish him off, maybe see if he had anything left to steal from him. But he doesn't. Jesus tells the crowd that the Samaritan saw the injured man, was moved with compassion for him, and cared for him at his own expense until he was back to full health. He went to him. He bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Look after this man, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." Now this is a beautiful story about how we can care for other people, how we can care for our neighbor, but even more so, how we should care for our enemy, the weak and the vulnerable. Maybe you remember it from assembly at school. Don't kick little Timmy in the head when he's fallen down during football because you hate him. Be a good Samaritan. This message is needed in our society today just as much as ever. In a world filled with so much hate and division, this is a deeply subversive message that we should cling on to. But when Jesus told this story, he was showing us something more than just how to treat our neighbor. He was showing us himself, revealing his character, his purpose, who he was, and what he had come to do. Like the Samaritan, Jesus comes to us when we are broken and helpless. He's saying to the crowd, you might feel like you've taken the wrong road, and life has given you an absolute kicking and left you for dead. I have come to take care of you, to bandage your wounds, to walk with you and care for you and carry you into full restoration. He's saying to the crowd, you might feel burdened like you can't go on. I will carry your burdens and even carry you. He's saying you might feel like you've been left and let down by those who are supposed to care for you. You might feel rejected or abandoned or forgotten. I have not forgotten you. I see you. I will not pass you by. Or as the Bible constantly puts it in different places, I will never leave you or forsake you. He's saying to the crowd, it's not about looking right. It's not about being squeaky clean like the first 2 guys who walked on by. He's saying that the heart of God isn't close to the ones who look like they've got it all together. The heart of God is close to the mess and to the pain. It's not about having all the answers already. It's about saying, help, God, I need you. Jesus is saying to the crowd, I will be the one who pays the price for your restoration. The life, death, and resurrection of Jesus paid the way for you to be restored into fullness of life. Whatever mess you feel like you are in, Jesus promises to meet you in it and draw close to you and to walk together with you into new life. As we've heard tonight, faith in Jesus is not about proving ourselves to be good, but about receiving his mercy. He does not ask us to clean ourselves up first. He meets us where we are. He lifts us onto his shoulders, and he carries us into new life. The invitation is simple. Will you let Jesus be the one who comes near to you? Will you trust him to rescue, forgive, and heal you? He is not far off. He is already reaching out to you. And that is an invitation that you can grab hold of tonight. I will never forget the moment when I realized for the first time that all the stuff I had heard about Jesus was true and it had been for me. I had heard about God my whole life, but 2 weeks off my 18th birthday, I had spent all of my life looking for my satisfaction in all of the wrong places. My relationship life was a complete mess and was doing me damage that it would take years for Jesus and I to unpack together. My obsession with finding a great time was escalating so rapidly that I honestly now can't look back and have any idea where I would be now if Jesus had not intervened in my life and met me in my life. I was so controlled by other people's perception of me that I genuinely had no real concept of who I actually was. And then one night, 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, I was lying in my bed at 3 a.m., having just been to a massive house party filled with all the things that the world told me a 17-year-old boy should want. And I was lying there, and I couldn't help how dissatisfied I felt. I couldn't understand how it could have been bigger, better, grander, how it could have grown, how I could have fully lent into any more of the promises of the world. And I lied there feeling so unfulfilled, and I dared to ask a question into the abyss. Is this it? And it was at that moment that I encountered the presence of Jesus. And I experienced this feeling of love and peace like I had never known. I went from being as high as a kite to immediately sober. And yet I experienced something that I can only describe as never feeling more alive before that moment. It was like feeling my heart start to beat for the first time. That moment changed everything for me. Since the beginning of the world, God's rescue plan for a hurting world that is in pain has been a revolution of individual hearts hearing, realizing, and responding to what Jesus has done for them and accepting the embrace of the God who scoops down to carry us into restoration. The life, death, and resurrection of Jesus was for you. He was born to save you. He went to the cross thinking of you. As he was resurrected, so were you. It was your brokenness that he dealt with, and it was you that he set free. He wants a relationship with you because he loves you, and he is for you in every sense of the word. Paul, the guy who wrote massive chunks of the New Testament after meeting Jesus and being transformed by him, says it like this: "The life I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God, Jesus, who loved me and gave himself for me." Who loved me and gave himself for me. Paul didn't experience anything you can't. It is that personal, and it has the power to change everything. So that is my first point this evening, that Jesus is revealing himself in this interaction, his heart, his character, and his promise to you in this interaction. The second is that Jesus invites us to make space, to make room to explore. And I love what we see in this encounter. Jesus welcomes questions. The teacher of the law, this super religious guy, he asks a question of Jesus, right? He says, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And unlike we so often think, it's not a massive booming voice from heaven that says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, body, and strength," right? That doesn't happen, does it? Jesus is like, "Good question, man. What do you think? Like, what have you read? What have you read in Scripture? Like, how do you understand it?" I love that, right? The God who made the whole universe and everything in it is like, "I'd love to know what you think." In Matthew, Jesus says, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." Essentially, he's saying, I'm all-powerful. I can do whatever I want. I am God. And yet, in this moment, we see him bounce questions back and forth with a guy that he literally created. It's wild. If God is God, then he is big enough to stand up to any question, any probe, any issue or frustration that we might have with him or of him. And if his character is like he has shown it to be in this interaction, the God who scoops down to pick us up in our mess, then he invites us to question, to query, to ask of him, to grapple with the things that we don't understand about who he is or why he does the things he does or what he's up to in our life. His invitation to us is relational, and he invites us to bounce questions back and forth with him about who he is and what that could mean for us. When I was thinking about this, I couldn't help think of something that happened last weekend. So if you've ever met me before or spoken to me for any short period of time, you will probably have heard me mention that I ride a motorbike. Yes, I know what you're thinking. The Church of England has a bad boy, and you're looking right at him. Just kidding. And one of the other things that's been going on over my last year is that I read this brilliant book that was basically all about, in a world where most of us, or a lot of us, work at a desk and don't really do anything with our hands, we've lost this sense of our hunter-gatherer selves, and a lot of dissatisfaction comes from not doing stuff with our hands, because that was what we were made for, and we should be good at it. And AI might be able to steal your desk job, but it's not going to be able to fix your motorbike engine for you. So I took on that challenge. I thought it was really interesting that I basically sit at a desk all the time. It's very hard to work out the outcomes of my day. So maybe I'd have a go at trying to do more of the motorbike servicing myself. And so last weekend, I was doing an oil filter and change. That is pretty straightforward. But I got a bit cocky and I thought, while I'm there, the oil inspection window, which is this tiny little piece of glass on the side of the engine, it's always been clouded up since I bought the motorbike. So I was like, while I've drained the oil, I could take apart that side of the engine so I can get to the back side of that piece of glass and I can clean it. And then I'll be able to see my oil level really well and the color of the oil and all that kind of stuff. Really thrilling stuff, I know. And basically, I started on the Friday night. I drained all the oil out. I completely emptied it out. Then I started to take the side of the engine off my motorbike. And there were 12 bolts, and I did 11 of them. And then on the 12th one, I turned the spanner, and it just sheared the head of the bolt right off. And I thought, oh my life, what have I done? I need my motorbike in 2 days to commute to work. What am I going to do? So I frantically did some more Googling. I'd done plenty of research originally, but now I was Googling a bit more. Ironically asked ChatGPT what to do when you shear the head off a bolt. And then I got in deep. I was on some noughties-esque old man motorbike forums. And then I shot off to B&Q to buy a new tool, came back, tried it. That didn't work. So then I was like, right, I've got to call in the cavalry. So I rang my dad, who's an engineer, and he said, don't worry about it. I'll come up tomorrow morning. We'll be able to fix it. Don't worry, just leave it now. So I sprayed some lubricating stuff in it, left it overnight. In the morning, Hannah, my wife, was off seeing a friend. So I had the 3-year-old and the baby. And my dad arrived. And I would love to say that it was a real task, to rectify what I had done the night before. It took him under 40 seconds, I reckon. Then, obviously, he's bored. So like a dad, he just started chopping down a hedge in my garden. And he was like, and now you can do what you were going to do and put it back together and I'll sort this out. The 3-year-old went off with him to, demolish a hedge. And I started back like, okay, now I know what I'm doing. I'm back on track. I can carry on doing what I was supposed to be doing. The baby made this quite difficult. So first, he's crawled across and he's now sat behind where the tree is going to fall that my dad is chopping down. So I ran over and I pulled him back across. Then I realized I'd left one of the tools I needed upstairs in our house. So I ran upstairs. I fell up the stairs, smashed my arm on the stair gate, ran back down, found the baby. He's eating gravel on the drive now. I get back to where I'm trying to do it. Amos, the 3-year-old, calls me. I get distracted. I pinch my finger with a pair of pliers. Now my hand's bleeding. And so I'm like back over there, and I'm trying to sort that out. And then, just as I think, right, I know what I'm doing now. I found all the tools. I'm ready to roll. I turn to see where the baby is. He's crawled right into the garage to where the empty pan of the dirty oil that I drained out of the bike yesterday is. And he's just splashing in it. And then as I'm like trying to like realize what's happening there, he starts to put his hands towards his mouth. So I'm like running down the drive, dodging my dad with the chainsaw. I get to the baby just as he's about to put the oil in his mouth. And I think to myself, I don't think this is the right time for this. This is not the time. And so I take the baby in, scrub him head to toe to get, the oil off, and preferably the smell of oil so I don't have to confess to his mum anything about this interaction, which I failed at. But why am I telling you this? Well, I think there's two things, right? When we think about asking questions, questions lead to more questions, right? Sometimes in life we can be going along thinking, I've got this all pretty worked out. I read a 5-minute article about how to do this. It'll be fine. Then we hit the sheared off bolt, yeah? And we have more questions to ask. Or we have to speak to a friend to get help. Or we have to consult someone else. Or go and find something else. There are always more questions to ask. And that happens in life, right? We meet things in life that we're like, I don't feel equipped to handle this. I thought I had like a lid on it all. And now I don't. And so I'm going to need to ask some more questions. And the other thing I was thinking about when I was thinking about this is life is insane, right? Trying to do that thing with the baby. And, it's just life can be like that, can't it? Full of so many distractions and things that pull us off in various directions and things that we have to deal with that we can end up feeling so overwhelmed. And so my thought is like, that wasn't the time. We need to build time into our lives to ask these questions that God invites us to ask of him. We need to carve out space to do it. And Jesus invites us into relationship to bounce questions back and forth with him about who he is and what that could mean to us. Whether we feel like we already know him, there is always more to his character. Or whether we feel like maybe we knew him a long time ago, he invites us back to ask questions about where he's been or what's been going on, or whether he's there. Maybe whether we don't believe in him at all. Maybe you're here tonight supporting one of the guys that got baptized. You don't believe in any of this, and you're worried your friend's having a breakdown. Just kidding. He invites us into his character, to question his character, his reality, his identity. He constantly says to people in the Bible, who do you think I am? He invites us to ask those questions of him. If he is God, then he is big enough to stand up to any question, any probe, any issue or frustration you might have of him or your friend might have of him. And if his character is the one that we've seen in this interaction, that beautiful gentleness, the one who won't leave us or forsake us, the one who meets us where we are, in our mess, and carries us into new life. If he is all of those things, then he invites us to question, to query, to ask of him, to grapple with things we don't understand about him or who he is and why he does the things that he does and who he might be for us. All we need to do is take space to ask. Amen.